Springboks depth chart for 2022, folks. I've been looking forward to this one because the Springboks, I feel, my gut tells me, took a bit of a different approach in 2022 from 2021. And what we're talking about is how did they pick their sides? Did they go through and pick the kind of same old 15 to keep things consistent, or did they do a bit of rotation? Like I'm saying, my gut tells me they brought in some new faces, but yeah, let's see what the data tells us. We've already had a look through Ireland and France and New Zealand, so the Springboks being fourth in the world, they're the fourth one we're going to have a look at. So yeah, we'll go through the win-loss record, what depth they kind of built by position, and what was the most selected 15. As always, you guys can let us know your thoughts. So 2022, the win-loss record, 8 from 13. Couple of home losses, one to Wales and one to the All Blacks, but they obviously win the Wales series. They win the initial game against the All Blacks. They split the games with the Wallabies. 2 from 2 against Argentina meant going into that last game of the Rugby Championship, they still had a chance to win it. And then the Tour of Europe, 2 close losses to the number 1 and 2 sides in the world, and then a couple of away wins to Italy and England. So it's kind of a mixed season, isn't it? It's one where you look at it and go, could have easily won a few more of those games, could have got the Rugby Championship trophy if they'd been able to knock off New Zealand at Ellis Park kind of thing. But also certainly could have been worse, right? You could have lost both games to Australia. That was the first win in Australia in donkey's years. They could have lost to England, but yeah, I think it's maybe fitting of the spot they got in the world. But as I said, the thing I think is a bit different is 2021 coming out of the lockdown year, where the Springboks didn't play the year before. They kind of had to keep things consistent, but did they do a bit more depth building in 2022? We'll have a look. So we'll start with the front row. The front row, number 1, Stephen Kitsoff, your loose head, is there in green because he played just over half the game time for the Springboks in 2022, and that's the same as last year. He's your main guy. And then Ox and Che is there in blue. So Kitsoff and Ox, a pretty reliable combo. That's pretty much your 1 and 2 or your 2 and 1 guys to start on the loose head side of the scrum. Other guys who've had a crack are Nyakane Dutoit and Mkunu. Mkunu's the first wing, and he got one game, but he had his first cap for the Springboks. So this is what I'm talking about kind of new names being introduced, and I think there's quite a lot in this squad, but yeah, we'll get to them. But just looking at loose head, I think your starting 2 guys are pretty promising. Trevor Nyakane obviously didn't get as much game time as maybe we would have liked on either side of the scrum, but I think he had a bit of time out injured, didn't he? Hooker has been a switch because you got Malcolm Marx there in green and Bongi and Mbonambi there in blue. Last year it was the other way around, but it was still those guys who split the minutes between them. And then Joseph Dweba is there in yellow. I went back and checked my notes from Hooker for the Springboks depth chart in 2021, and the one thing I said was Dweba needs more minutes to see if he's the real deal, and he got more minutes, even though that amount that he's got there looked kind of minuscule. He got about 10% of the game time. He still got a lot more than he did, and more than double, I think, the minutes that he got the year before. Did he really take his chance? Maybe not. Some of the line-out stuff under pressure went askew, but I've since seen him playing for the Stormers, and I still think he's promising. But it's going to be hard for him to get game time ahead of Mbonambi and Marx, but clearly the Springboks coaches did want to give him a bit more game time than they had the year before, and they could maybe afford to. And then tight head, Franz Malherbe's there in green, Vincent Cox there in blue. That's your same duo as your premier and second guy for last year as well. Trevor Nyakane's there in yellow, and then Thomas the Toy got like 2 minutes before he got red carded in that last game against England. So yeah, it's a pretty consistent one for the Boks, with like the props being the same guys who led the way last year, and then Malcolm Marx and Bongi just swapping places. So it's not real kind of revolutionary change, and one guy gets a debut. Trevor Nyakane's a wee bit down on minutes, and Wilco Lowe doesn't appear at all, whereas he got a bit of like minuscule kind of minutes last year. But yeah, it's relatively steady as she goes. I think it's relatively healthy looking, with a clear first guy, a clear second guy. Maybe there's not enough minutes going to the third guy, but like I said, Trevor, if he needs to step up, has certainly got plenty of experience. And Dweba, I think if they give him a little bit more game time, can make the step up, but we'll kind of have to wait and see. Locks, it's very similar to last year. Eben Etzebeth, man, I've got him at like 93% of the game time, and that's up from last year where he already had like, I think it was like 80 something last year. Like Eben is just absolutely dominating. He virtually plays every minute as your tight head lock. He's a big human, isn't he? And he demands his minutes. He doesn't let much get away. Salma Morat is there in blue, and I think Diaka even had a cameo shifting from one side to the other. But for the most part, it's Big Eben. You would hate to see that guy go down with clearly how reliant the Springboks are on him. I rated him as potentially the best lock in 2022. Him and Tyke Byrne. One tends to play loose head lock and one tends to play tight head lock. So maybe that is your best locking duo in the world for 2022. But Big Eben, that's huge. Huge numbers. On the other side, Diaka is there in green. He's followed by Franco Mostert. Franco Mostert didn't get that many starts in the second row, but he often shifted into the second row from the back row in a lot of the games for the Boks. Marvin Orie is also there in yellow. So I guess so far from the ones we've seen, maybe that number 5 jersey is the most healthiest split in terms of the premier guy gets about half the game time. As to give him credit for being the best player in his position, but the second guy still needs about a third of the game time, and then the third guy needs about a fifth, although Orie's a bit under that. But that seems like a nice split in terms of depth. Just because looking at Etzebeth's one, he demands that time, like I said, but if he got injured, that's kind of, I don't want to say all your eggs in one basket, but you know what I mean. You don't have another guy who's in 2022 anyway been getting that kind of game time. So yeah, that just is what that is. I should say some of the other guys. We had Nokia, who was another guy who got a little bit of game time this year. He's a guy who had just a bit of that taste of that Springbok Rugby, and Morat's there too. So yeah, that's your locks. Now again, I've forgotten to say at the start of the video, we're only looking at tests here. Remember, South Africa did also have a chance to build some depth with their SAA games. So South African non-test team also toured. It's not quite the same as tests, but that is certainly a chance to build that depth at the level below what these guys were playing at. So, yeah, even if the Boks didn't give guys other than Etzebeth that much game time in the SAA team, they certainly did. Right, loose forwards is one area where there's a little bit of a change from last year, because so far, I mean, apart from Malcolm Marx and Bongi swapping, we're seeing the same guys as last year, still the front runners in their positions. And I also forgot to mention Jacques Neinaber. We haven't seen him in the locks for a long time either, but he's another guy who can be called up if he gets himself fit. But the back row, Peter Steff in the number 7 jersey has actually been getting some game time compared to last year where he spent much of the year out injured. So Peter Steff just under half the game time on the blind side. Him and Franco Mostert, they do like that kind of lock loose forward to the Springboks, kind of extra line-out option, big body. So Peter Steff and Mostert at 7. And then you've also had a bit of Quokka Smith. I think Quokka Smith ended up being the main guy last year on the blind side because Peter Steff was out for as long as he was. And then Elric Lowe, Dion Fourie, Marco van Staden, these guys get kind of token game time. But again, that kind of healthy split of your leading 3 guys is Peter Steff, Mostert, and then Smith. And then on the open side, it's the Sio Kolisi show, man. 80+% of the game time, it's been Sio Kolisi. He's really played a lot of minutes. And he was the number 1 guy last year as well for minutes in his position, which is kind of not surprising. Who else has made an appearance? Quokka Smith in blue, Marcel Coetzee in yellow, Dion Fourie purple. Reinhard Alstad got a wee bit of a cameo. I think that's 2 years in a row. He's had like a wee taste and then back out of things, and then Van Staden is there as well. So Khaleesi, if he's fit, he's playing. He's your captain. That kind of does not surprise me. And then number 8, so kind of like with Peter Steff coming back from injury to become the new guy, on the blind side, Jasper Wiese at number 8 has replaced Dwayne Vermeulen as the main guy for minutes. So Wiese over half of the game time, and then Dwayne Vermeulen's there in blue with not even 20% of the minutes. Although, got to keep in mind, the Springboks, at times when picking their squad this year, basically said, look, Dwayne Vermeulen's a guy we want to manage his minutes because he's getting a bit older, and he doesn't really need experience. Like the dude's a World Cup winner, at his age, he's pretty much done it all already, so they're not necessarily going to benefit by playing him, whereas Visa genuinely could use more minutes at international level, so he's been getting them. Evan Rus is another guy who's come onto the scene. He's there in yellow, so pleasing to see him get some game time, not more game time, but some game time, some decent amount. Quagga Smith as well, he's just missed it everywhere, man, isn't he? Dion Ferree as well, and then Elric Lowe even briefly as well there in orange. So yeah, Jasper Visa and Dwayne Vermeulen are obviously the main two guys seemingly, with a third option being any one of Rus or Smith or potentially somebody else. So yeah, as far as the Springbok forward pack goes, I think that's it's pretty good, isn't it? I mean, you got World Cup winner and Kitsoff and Marks and Malherbe and Etzebeth and Tiyaka and Peter Steff and Kulisi. Those are all your starting guys. Visa is the only one who wasn't like a World Cup starting guy, in the number 8 jersey, and Vermeulen is there just behind him. So yeah, it's that's the 4-pack. Into the backs. Backs is real interesting because you get some genuine change. A lot of the front runners for the box got injured this year, so we've seen some genuine change. Looking at number 9, is it Fafan Green? No, it's not. It's Jaden Hendrickse. The dude got more than half of the game time this year, which is really pleasing. Because Faf, I think, is another one who maybe doesn't necessarily need the minutes. And it's always a headache for the coaches, right, to balance, like, we need to win, but we also need to give more players game time. So Hendrickse, I thought, stepped up pretty well. De Klerk is there in blue, so he's still got a pretty decent chunk of the game time. And then there's a fair drop-off between those two guys. And the next guys, Kobus Reinach's there in yellow. He's a classy player, another one who's a veteran, so again, maybe doesn't need the experience necessarily. And then Herschel Yankees there in purple. They did also play Grant Williams in one game, but he didn't play halfback. I think he had to slot onto the wing because it was like one of those games where they had two guys on the bench and had a couple of injuries. So got like 5 or 6 minutes off the bench, but not even at halfback. So yeah, main guys are Hendrickse and De Klerk, with Reinach as your third option, who didn't get a heck of a lot of game time, but also injuries had to be managed with his kind of return to fitness as well. Number 10 is also an interesting one, because is the number 10 jersey Pollard in green? No, it's not. It's Damien Willemse. Damien Willemse appears... Does he appear in every other position? Not on the left wing. He appears at 12. He doesn't appear at 13, but he appears at 14 and 15. Like, Damien Willemse is very, very versatile. But he's the leading guy at 10, just under half the game time, and he's just ahead of Pollard. Remember, Pollard with his injury had a lot of time on the sidelines as well. And then you got some other guys in Francois Steyn who had a couple of goes. Elton Yankees, who's probably done in Springboks colours at this point in purple. And then Marnie Libok is the promising one in red. That's not even taking into account the likes of Achusen, who didn't get any game time in the Springboks colours, remembering that Mornay Steyn, who would have appeared briefly on the depth chart last year, has retired. But great to see someone other than Pollard getting game time, and Willemse just proves to be that jack of all trades. Some people say he's a little bit too attacking minded to be the leading 10, because he always just wants to run it, but he'll certainly be better for all that game time he's played at 10 this year. Into the midfield, it's kind of not surprising at 12. It's very similar to last year. Damien de Linde absolutely dominating the minutes there at 12, so more than, well, not quite 3/4 of the game time, but not too far away. And then Andre Esterhuizen there in blue. Obviously, when the games are outside the test windows, like the England game, they're unable to select a guy like Esterhuizen. I think it would have been nice to see him get a little bit more game time. I don't think Esterhuizen quite threatens de Linde in terms of the limited time we did see him. And then Willemse is there in yellow, so kind of not too far behind Esterhuizen for game time at 12, but it's pretty much all about de Linde. Whereas 13 is a big old shift, because Lucanio Arms spent much of the season also injured. Jesse Creel is your guy there in green with about half of the game time. Defensively very sound, but maybe not the most attacking minded 13 in the world. Keeping in mind, and I haven't done the full stats for all the 12s yet, but genuinely Damien de Linde does not pass that often. I think his mission by the coaches is to truck it up, and when you're a big unit like that, it kind of makes sense. But Creel potentially not getting as much ball as some of the other 13s. Again, I haven't looked at the full stats to confirm that, but I do know Damien de Linde's passing numbers are on the low side. I can confirm that, which you probably would have seen with your own eyes. Lucanio Arms there in blue. Obviously, if he's fit, he's certainly getting maybe Damien de Linde style minutes there. But remember, in a couple of games had to shift positions as well due to injuries. And then Damien de Linde is there again in yellow, so he appears twice. That's how ever-present he's been. Like, if you add Damien de Allende's minutes in green at 12 and then yellow at 13, the dude's playing 90+% of the minutes as well. So very, very, very key man in the Springboks setup. Outside backs, left wing, it's the Mapimpi show, kind of similar to last year. That guy genuinely just starts and is Mr. Consistent on the left wing. He's had a little bit of Arendse, a little bit of Fussy, but otherwise it's, as I said, pretty much Mapimpi. It's a little bit disappointing maybe we didn't get a little bit more of Fussy, but with the emergence of Arendse and Caden Moody, it's looking a little bit harder to get into that Springbok back three, to be honest. Right wing is a proper mixed bag. I think this is the lowest we've seen of any starter. Curtly Arendse there in green has about 30% of the game time on the right wing, and I think that's the lowest we've seen of any starter. Generally, the starters get, across Ireland and New Zealand and France, 50% or more of the game time, whereas Arendse is at like 30% on the right wing. Remember, he has played other positions. Caden Moody's there in blue. He's also been a pretty good revelation. So both those guys, new names. Colby's there in yellow. Obviously had his injury troubles too. Lecanio Arms had to move to the right wing. Warwick Galant's been on the right wing. Damien Willems has been on the right wing. Jesse Creel spent a few minutes before he got knocked out on the right wing. So the right wing has been a real revolving door. And then fullback, Willie Leroux continues on as the main guy at fullback. Damien Willems there again, like Willems a fullback, right wing, 10, 12, everywhere. Galant as well at fullback, didn't maybe get that much of a chance this year, sadly, because I do rate Warwick Galant. Colby had a game at 15, Frans Steyn had a big game time at 15, and then Arendse had a game time at 15 as well. So 15, a little bit more stable, obviously, with Leroux. And the Boks genuinely look, playmaking-wise, a better side when he's at 15, don't they? Maybe not the most direct attacking threat, but when you can put somebody else into space, it's just as deadly. Some guys we have seen kind of fall off the pace, and the outside backs is the likes of Sibu Nkosi, who got some decent game time last year. Roscoe Speckman, I think he got some game time at the start of last year, didn't he? And then he'd already kind of fallen off the picture by last year's end. So by this year's end, he's really not even a consideration, sadly, because the dude's a threat, but there's a lot of guys in that Springbok team who are. But yeah, it is an interesting one compared to some of the other teams we've looked at. The Springboks genuinely haven't had that many guys from the previous year who've fallen off a cliff. Like, the main guys are still there, like Kitsoff and Marks and Mbonambi and Mostert and Vermeulen. All these guys are still in the mix. It's just they've added other guys in the mix as well. A lot of debutants, Mkunu, Elric Lowe, Evan Roos, guys like this, Arendse, Esterhuizen being back into the team. Like, there's been a lot of new names added without necessarily having fully dropped some other guys out. The most selected 15 is not the one that's necessarily the best 15. It's just the ones that, like, from what we've just seen, who were the main guys in each position. So Kitsoff got the most minutes, Marks and Malherbe. That's a pretty world-class front row, I think you would say. And that's the same as last year, apart from Marks swapping with Mbonambi. Eben and Diaka, same. Kulisi, Peter Steff, and Visa. Peter Steff and Visa, like I mentioned, elevate themselves in terms of game time compared to last year. Hendrickse and Willemse, that's the 9-10. That's very different from last year, where it was certainly de Klerk and Pollard, but as I said, very good investment to get those guys some more minutes. De Allende and Creel, as I said, it would be if not for his injury, and then Mapimpi, Arendse, and Leroux. Arendse comes in on the right wing. I think it was Nkosi who had the most minutes on the right wing last year. Him, or I think it was him, ahead of Colby, because Colby was out a wee bit last year as well. But I think overall, if I'm not mistaken, the Boks have used like 48 players, which is more than France or Ireland, who used, I think, 45. And then New Zealand, I think, used 44. So 48 is the most we've seen thus far. And the Boks last year only used 41. So, as I said, they've definitely brought some more guys into the mix. And if you include the SAA, even more names, right? So, yeah, that's the Boks side, man. For 2022. Some people say, man, that must be a real pain in the backside to get all that data. It is, kind of. It takes a wee while. You got to go through all the team sheets and who was subbed and who did they replace and did they shift around and was there a card and did they swap positions when there was a card. And my son's running out there on the deck like a madman, if you can hear thumping. That's what that is. But yeah, if anyone watched this video and found it interesting, feel free to drop a like on the channel, the video. I would appreciate that. Drop a comment for what your thoughts are. If you want to buy me a beer, link down in the description. That's always helpful as well. I don't mind the old beer. But anyway, you guys let us know your thoughts. Who else do you think the Springboks could potentially bring in for next year, or do you think they've pretty much settled on the guys they've got? Do you reckon the squad is a good kind of balance of veterans and new guys, or do you think the new guys need to get a bit more game time? I think we've seen, certainly, especially in the backs, the new guys getting a lot of minutes, not always by choice, sometimes by injury-enforced selection. But anyway, you guys let us know your thoughts, and yes, I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.